Hey everybody, welcome back to our real estate and construction channel down here in the state of Texas. We have a guest from New York State. We have Rich Goldfarb. Like we spoke about a little bit before the call, he's lived many different lives, and it's a pleasure to have some time to sit down with him. Rich, how you doing?
Good, Aaron. Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I know we chatted for a bit earlier, but could you explain a bit about what you do and what's special about this time in your side of the business?
Sure. I have had a very varied career, many different careers. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York. I do remember where I come from, so I had to stick that in. But bringing you to a little bit more present day after decades of being in the media business, I decided to get a real estate license. And I've always enjoyed real estate. Personally, I've been involved in real estate of my own in New York City, in the Hamptons, beautiful Long Island, as well as Westchester, where I currently live. Also, I got involved in all of those places with renovation. So I have, a good background in that. But these days, I am working most of the time with my seller and buying clients, mostly in Westchester County.
And for those of us who don't know, Westchester, that would be north of the city of New York City, right?
It is. It is north of the city, and there are a lot. Westchester is very big, but I did spend a lot of time, the first 20 years of our time in Westchester, right on the Hudson River.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And just out of curiosity, you'd mentioned earlier, you've had many different lives in different industries. Could we maybe rewind a bit and talk about how you got your start and what attracted you initially to the first industry that you got in as a young man?
Sure. Well, again, quite a journey. I originally was very involved in music, the music industry, uh, vocal, trumpet, leading groups, dealing with agents and managers, and doing all that kind of stuff early on. Um, and then really spending time with a girl that I grew up with in Brooklyn led me to the media business. And I had a very interesting chat with her boss. And he said, call me every 2 weeks and we'll see what's up. And I called him every 2 weeks for 3 months. And then finally, the last call I had with him, when he said we were close, I said, no, we're not. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to give 2 weeks notice when I hang up the phone. So have a job ready for me then. And he did. So that was kind of a gutsy thing. But in a tough job market now for college grads, as my sons are finding, uh, being aggressive when you don't have obligations to family and kids and stuff, and you're trying to get your foot in the door with a career, do stuff like that. Show confidence, and you got to make things happen. Um, and I was always interested in media, be it music or TV, and fell into buying commercial time, which led me to the flip side, which was selling commercial time. And ultimately, I became head of sales for a number of cable networks.
And when you say commercial time, is that mostly for maybe nationwide networks or more local networks, or how exactly would that work?
Yeah, it was national,
Wow.
and I worked with really interesting companies and interesting people. One of my stops along the way was Turner Broadcasting, and working with Ted Turner, uh, and then later, maybe polar opposites from a political point of view, but I got involved working with Rupert Murdoch. So two huge visionary people in the media business, coming from very different different backgrounds.
The two polar opposites that we see today, right?
Exactly right.
Wow, that's fascinating. And how long were you in that side of the business?
Do I have to say? Uh,
You don't
yeah,
have to. It's all right.
many decades, many decades. Um, and the last company that I was involved with, well, the cable networks were the National Geographic channels, and I helped launch those networks across the country and the world, for that matter. Had some great times through that. Maybe in another podcast, I could talk about my Ted Turner stories, and that could be a mini series. But 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 bringing it a little bit more down the line. So Fox, not Fox News, Fox was the last stop in my corporate life, and then after that, I got involved in media consulting and advising. And then during that period, I decided, you know what, I've always been interested in real estate. Let's do some of that. And my first stop along the way there was in Tarrytown, New York, which is also right off the Hudson River, working with Corcoran at the time. And then a little while after that, I started working with Compass, pretty amazing company. That's where I am now. And Compass has invested anywhere between 1 and 1.5 billion, with a B, dollars in technology. And Great colleagues, great company.
Absolutely. And it seems like it was a relatively smooth transition into real estate. Coming from media and having that sort of background, you could have picked anything. Like, what really spoke to you about working in the real estate business in particular?
Yeah, well, I've always had an interest in not just the negotiation with real estate, but really all kinds of aspects of it, including architecture, which I kind of toyed with when I was a kid as maybe something I would do. But then I got involved in a lot of properties in the Hamptons, New York City, Westchester, also with renovation. So I touched a lot of different pieces of the business. And in fact, the first apartment that I rented at the time in New York City, that building converted to co-op. And so I got involved actually with the conversion of that building into co-ops. And that kind of got me into the beginning spirit, along with making more money eventually, of actually buying properties.
Wow. Could you explain what a co-op exactly is?
Yeah, there's a distinction. There are really, if you're owning an apartment, there are really two ways to go. I'm sure there are others, but to keep it simple, there's a co-op where you own shares in the building. You don't physically actually own the apartment, and there are advantages and disadvantages to both. And then there are condominiums, where you actually own the unit. And you know, co-ops generally are priced a little lower, and condos are placed a little higher. However, for co-ops, the maintenance fees are usually significantly higher, and for condos, they're generally significantly lower. So, you know, there are those distinctions. Not to go off on a whole seminar about this, but uh, I prefer usually condos because there's no condo board. Like, there can be, but it's not as rigorous as a co-op board, which can really encumber the opportunity to actually get approved. Sometimes the opportunity to sell your shares to a new tenant or a new owner. So there's more flexibility with a condo.
I didn't realize there was also a co-op board. So it sounds like the condo is less stringent, right?
It's less stringent, and the process itself is much more streamlined. So for a co-op, believe believe it or not, you might get handed a contract slash book of literally 60 to 80 pages. And of course, I always recommend that you go through an attorney who has background in real estate to help the prospective buyer with that process. But it's lengthy, can be frustrating, and time consuming. And then at the end of the process, there's no guarantee the board will approve you.
Mm. I can see how that can get a little bit dicey, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
just out of curiosity, how would someone, maybe someone who's getting started, how would they pick a niche or a particular part of the business, maybe to work in or even to invest in?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak with great authority to how things are in every state. And, states make their own rules and regulations when it comes to real estate for the most part. Uh, but talking to New York State, uh, New York, I mean, one thing that it can be a very good thing when you go to real estate school, or however you're learning to do it online or in person. I did it in person originally, uh, leading to getting a real estate license in the state of New York. Their curriculum is very wide. So, in addition to just nuts and bolts related to selling and buying real estate, they have a lot of courses that go beyond that to like property management and some of the different opportunities that you have. To a little extent, they go into just basics and fundamentals of construction. They you could talk about maybe going into a legal end. So I think it's really a question of, there are two ways I sort of mentor people, be it real estate or anything. um, Earlier in my career slash life, I would tell people, figure out what your passion is and follow your passion. And of late, maybe the last 5 years or so, I tell people, think about what you're good at and do that, because that might turn into a passion. But if it doesn't, and you're early enough in your career, you can still pivot and go to that passion, whatever that is. And of course, you could also combine both emotions and both North Stars, if you will, of both what you're good at and passion. But particularly in a tight job market like this one is right now, it's really finding a way to start.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there with the tight job market, right? It can be, at least just from what I've heard out from different people, it can be a bit scary and frustrating right now. The tight job market and inflation and rent and all this uncertainty and all these different things. It's almost, people don't want to hear, hey, just follow your passion, right? Maybe some,
Yeah.
others don't.
Well, it's interesting. I think the generation that I see right now with my own sons, 22-year-old triplets, uh, I get a lot of feedback, obviously, good and bad and ugly, from my kids and from their friends and from prospective employers, obviously, as well. And it's an interesting mix because, some kids sort of reject what I would call maybe the old way of doing business, more in my earlier times of my era from the past. And it's, to them, it's like, I'm not going to slave away. I'm going to hope I can make enough to be independent in some way, please. But they want experiences. They want to go on vacations. They don't want to be a slave to a job. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Earlier in my day, people would stay in a job for a long period of time now, and there was a stigma if you didn't. But now everyone tends to move around, with much more frequency. Uh, but in addition to the people that have this, if I'm being kind, perhaps a more enlightened view of work balance and all of that stuff, at the same time, there are killers out there who know exactly what they want to do, who have taken every conceivable step, and who present themselves in a manner where an employer feels like, wow, this person got their stuff together. So again, I'm not, I don't live in a black and white world. And sometimes that drives people a little crazy because I see a lot of gray. And people don't like ambiguity. I don't particularly either, but it's not a black and white world. So there can be middle grounds. And, a middle ground could be doing what's necessary to get a job, but not killing yourself. And that's probably my best advice.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's some great advice. And just out of curiosity, if you've worked with maybe younger investors or even younger clients, do you think uh, that perspective difference related to work is also reflected in their buying or selling behavior with real estate?
Um, that's a great question. I never really thought about that, but yes, I mean, look, there are certain stereotypes in people's minds, and those stereotypes change based upon their experience, in their generation, in their lifetime. So, yeah, basically, in real estate, in everything, but particularly in real estate, you have to modify your conversation with people, recognizing that they have a different experience level, and they're coming from a different place. So it is very important to try to adjust. Um, but even with more seasoned clients, um, it's interesting how you can't assume that they know as much as you think they do. And I like to view what I do. Look, we all like to make transactions and we all have bills to pay. But I like to think of myself more as an advisor than a salesperson. And that's and from a pragmatic point of view, that's how you build a reputation. And I actually care about these people. And I don't want them to make a mistake. And I also want them to talk positively about me as, a referral with their circle of friends and colleagues and what have you.
Sure. And that's a nice distinction to make between a salesperson who's obviously trying to make money and sell you something versus, playing that advisory role. To you, what makes a good real estate advisor?
Well, the first stop, and this is true of any kind of sales relationship, and that is listening. And asking the right questions. So, you know, now I'll sort of talk to what's not good, and then I'll flip it a bit. What's not good is focusing on what you want to sell, uh, and whether it fits the parameters of the person or not. But the first step is finding out what the needs and wants, and that's the way I always position it. They're two different things. Uh, what are the things you need in a home? And there are lots of parameters within that. Can you square footage? Land, not land, price point. You just go through the whole list. Um, and then if you want, you can layer on the wants, but you can then explain uh, and usually having data to go along with it, like comps and a number of other things, to demonstrate that you're not just making stuff up, is to say, okay, well, that's your wants, but then that takes your budget from what you said up 35%, you know. And then you have to get realistic about what the affordability is, and not just affordability, but you're going to have to be providing financial information if you're getting a mortgage, and even if you're paying cash, which a lot of people are these days, to avoid interest rates on mortgages.
Absolutely. And that's a great point there as well. Really, that distinction between the salesman and the advisory role. Um, listening and putting, in a way, putting yourself almost into their shoes, right?
Exactly right. And the more information you can garner from the client, the more targeted you'll be in finding places for them to live. Um, One of the things I also do is I represent sellers, through listings, and through experience with clients and my own properties. You find there are just some fundamentals with selling that are vitally important as well. And things like figuring out, which is science and art, the right price. Every client thinks their home is the greatest home in the United States, and they have certain expectations. Some of that just comes from hope. Some of it comes from hearing about different things. Um, but it's very important to be careful not to overprice a home. That to me is one of the biggest sins of how you go about selling a home. Because if you do overprice and it stays on the market too long, or you have to lower the price after the fact, it becomes a tainted property. Not only sometimes in the minds of would-be buyers, but even agents
Mhm.
sometimes say, there must be something wrong with that home. It's been on the market too long, or they decrease the price a lot. What's wrong with that home? So that's very important. Another very important thing to do on the sales side is to make sure you do all the right stuff to make your house marketable. So staging, decluttering, painting, curb appeal, professional photographs. Uh, I was fortunate enough to have my house outside of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow, right on the Hudson River. So, in addition to exterior and interior photographs by a very good professional, we had aerial drones. So you get to see the house and the river simultaneously. Now, some of this costs maybe more money than certain people can afford, but based upon the price point of the home, you decide, how much money you can spend on marketing. Uh, but these fundamentals, people need to understand how important they are, and not just taking some little camera and or even a phone camera and running around the house and clutter all over the place and personal objects all over the place. There's a way to do this right, or even better, in an optimal manner.
Absolutely, definitely in an optimal manner. It's so those details are so crucial as well. It's easy to say, hey, a picture's a picture. I have an iPhone, or in marketing, I can market it myself. I can tell my cousin or my brother, right? But there's a way to go about things that elicit the optimal solution.
Absolutely. And, there are so many misconceptions out there with the general public about the process of buying and selling homes, and particularly with the advent of the internet and the pervasive variety of platforms out there, from Zillow to everything else. Sometimes people think, oh, I'll just identify the house that I want. I'll tell the agent that's it. They'll open the door and that's it. But, the duties that an agent does can be just so expansive and time consuming, and over a long period of time to get to close. And, you have deals fall apart. And all that time you spent, you don't get paid for it. You spend a lot of time showing people houses, maybe over the course of a year. I have a client now, for 2 years, I've been showing him homes. And if ultimately this particular client never buys a home from me or gives me a listing, all of that time and energy and effort results in not a penny. So the misconception being, oh, agents are overpaid and it's easy. What do they do? And that part of that issue is on the industry and on me and people like me. They need to be educated.
That's right, because from their perspective, it's it's easy, right? I mean, just turning the key and opening the door. Hey, here you go. This is what you wanted. You were the one that told me about it. But what it sounds like what you're saying is there's a lot more behind the scenes hard work that maybe isn't seen by the average person.
Yeah, I mean, look, like every industry, it's homogeneous. So you'll have some agents that are not particularly good, and some are average, and some are really good at what they do. And do the right thing. In many cases, have to do the right thing based upon all the rules and regulations. So it's not easy, and it's complicated, and it's your, in most cases, biggest investment. So you better get it right. And it's very hard to get it right unless you have that advisor taking you through the process.
Sure. Uh, I guess speaking of having someone walk you through the process and kind of help you along the way, could you speak about on the buying and selling side, what are some common struggles right now that we're seeing in 2024, maybe compared to years past in the real estate market?
Yeah, well, this is a turbulent time, so your question is very timely. Uh, Not too long ago, and still flying around a bit, there was COVID, which changed everything and had an amazing impact on real estate in terms of migrations out of cities and remote working and all the different pressures on inventory and pricing that occurred with that. And then, of course, following that, and actually present sort of in that time as well, was very limited inventory. Uh, Extremely limited inventory, extremely limited attractive inventory. So there are lots of reasons for that we don't have to go into now, but some of it being, lack of construction keeping up with demand, and that whole migration because of COVID, creating imbalances where, vacancies in city centers and then incredible tightness in suburbs. Uh, but now you can add on two other things in answering your question. One of them is what we covered, inventory, interest rates. So interest rates went from incredibly, almost historically low numbers like, 3%, 3.5%. But they quickly, because of inflation and the Fed wanting to cap inflation down, they quickly kind of skyrocketed, to more than double that in a very short amount of time. And that's had a profound effect on the real estate market as well as the entire economy. But sticking with the real estate market, uh, you then made, unless you were paying with cash, you then made buying a home with a mortgage astronomically more expensive. And then there's another piece to that. The other piece to that is then sellers didn't want to part with the interest rates they had locked in, because where are they going to go? They have to live someplace if they sell their house. Now, if they sell their house and are in not a position to pay cash for the new place they're going to live, they're going to be subject to those 7% interest rates. So you have lots of sellers which would have been adding to the inventory in the market for buyers, not putting their house up for sale. So there's this vicious cycle of low inventory.
Mm. That's a wonderful explanation, just kind of walking through, especially the tail end as well, right? If I'm making money in a city and I have a house, I locked in this rate. Why am I going to jump into uncharted waters? And man, I have to pay this high interest rate, and the cycle continues.
Now, we can go backwards for a bit, and we could talk about what your great question from earlier about younger people, and their view of real estate and what have you. I, having lived for a while, remember, this is going to sounds crazy to people. 18% interest rates decades ago, generations ago. We lived through that. And that, the theory of relativity, if you will, I don't mean Einstein, but everything is relative. So, you go from 3.5 to 7, 8%. That's a huge increase. But 7.5 to 8% interest rate versus 18% in the 1970s. So it's very much about what you experience in a given time frame as a consumer.
Sure. And that's I guess that's a bit before my time, but it's that generational difference is so interesting. Just thinking about maybe guys my age wouldn't be thinking that way, but whereas someone who lived through it during the 70s, you could remember, hey, even 7%, maybe right now it's not ideal, but it ain't too bad compared to years past.
Yeah, and invariably, a lot of people will come back to me, particularly the younger folks, and say, "Yeah, well, I don't really care. I'm living now."
Yeah.
Uh, and there is some validity to that, but you know, akin to the stock market, where it's very difficult to time the stock market, it's very difficult to time any market, including real estate.
Hmm.
So there's a school of thought that says, you know, don't wait too long for that perfect or not so perfect interest rate before you get started, because there can be an advantage to getting equity in the housing market over time, so that what looked like something, maybe not affordable enough becomes impossibly affordable if you wait too long.
Hmm.
But, you do have to make sure you don't get overextended. Uh, so, I never try and overly push people into something that doesn't financially make sense. Sometimes, even if they could get a mortgage that's approved, I might say, you're a little over your skis. Maybe we should go to a slightly lower price point, or maybe you can find a way to take a lower percentage of a mortgage and find a little more cash, so that your payments aren't as high as they would be.
Sure, that makes perfect sense, especially when there's so much information flying around everywhere. There's some people saying you're better off renting. There's some people that are going to say, hey, the best time to buy was yesterday. So you have all this information flying around. It can be very disorienting, especially
Yeah,
in uncertain times.
yeah. I mean, I'm a fan, in general, of building equity and trying to be an owner. Um, and we didn't talk about passive income and actually investing, which is a neat way also to try and accumulate some wealth over time. Um, but the renting issue, there are pros and cons to both. There are good reasons and not so good reasons for both. It's your circumstances. Um, just to make an observation, even though you haven't asked this, um, one of the things that's frustrating to me, and I'm sure others like me, is, and there's no really great way around it other than thinking locally and finding somebody like me. There are always headlines, national headlines, and I don't know if I could think of a business that's more local than real estate. So, if you were to look at a headline in Forbes, I don't know, I'm making it up, real estate market, exploding to the biggest numbers of all time. Uh, and conversely, the market's about to crash, and, it goes down to the town, it goes down to the county, it goes down to the street. So on the same street, I could show you similar houses where one has multiple bids and the other doesn't. How could that be? Because that's how specific real estate is. Now, one very important thing before we go, and I have more time if you'd like to continue, um, and that's you asked about the state of affairs right now. Huge uh, legal and regulatory changes have taken place as of August 17th. That's why I said it was so timely in many states across the country. Some states were already doing things similar to what's occurring right now, but most of the big brokerages, including Compass, uh, have settled lawsuits that have taken place. Now, I'm not going to go into my opinion of how effective these new changes are for protecting consumers. I actually think they're doing the opposite. But in their misguided, perhaps, effort to have more transparency in the business, they've shaken things up. They being through these lawsuits and the Department of Justice ultimately making changes to principles that we've used effectively for a very long time, so that I could go through a number of them, but just at a high altitude, you had the listing agent, those agents representing sellers would pay the buyer agent compensation. And now that's ending. Well, that still can happen. The difference being clients now have to sign buyer agreements with the buyer agents and not sort of depend upon the sales side to get things done. Sellers can still offer out compensation to buying agents because it's in their interest to. They don't have to, but it's in their interest to, because the largest, widest marketplace for your house is the best way to go. And if you motivate agents to see your house, you're going to have a bigger, wider market. But this is not the way things had been done. So now you have to educate all over again clients about the buying process and about agreements and about now how commission is going to work. And there are still, even on the real estate side, as a consequence of these changes, there's still some confusion about how this is going to work. And like anything else, it's going to be, kind of a bumpy time until everything comes a little bit back into equilibrium. I don't know how long that time is going to be, but it also, opens up the door to perhaps folks that shouldn't be in the business, or shouldn't be a real estate agent, who might start offering up, lower commission rates, uh, but not provide the value that traditional quality agents do. So, it'll be interesting to see the next 6 months or so, but everything about life and about business and about the real estate business has been kind of interesting these days.
Absolutely. I smiled. It reminded me of my grandpa. There's many things I remember from.
So this is two, Aaron. This is two times. The first time was, well, I'm too young to know
Uh,
about, about that, and now I'm the grandfather. So
no, I
that's
was
that's two.
two strikes, three strikes, I'm out, right?
No, it's okay.
No, not that you reminded me, but there are certain things that that's funny. There's certain things that my grandpa said that really stuck with me, and one of them he said was, "Aaron, you get what you pay for," right?
That is largely true.
Yeah,
That is largely true. We're all capable of making mistakes, right? Hindsight is 2020. So perfection is not something human beings are particularly good at. But if you do your homework and you connect with the right people, you have a much better chance at success.
That's right. That's right. And speaking of connecting with people, we'll make sure to have your information linked in the show notes, all that good stuff. Rich, is there anything that you haven't said you really just like to hit home for us?
I think we covered a lot. I'm going to see if I have any just genius notes here. And I'm not so sure. I think I covered what I wanted to. I don't know if it's genius or not, but I hope it's helpful to whoever winds up viewing and listening.
Sure thing. It sounded pretty good to me.
Thank you, Aaron. You've been great.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us again, guys. We're going to have Rich's information linked down there. So if you want to chat with him and really learn the distinction between a salesman and an actual advisor who's in your corner and helping you out, Rich is there. All right. So again, we're going to have his information linked. Rich, thank you so much. I sure learned quite a bit, and I'm sure our viewers have too. And we will talk to y'all next time.
Thank you. My pleasure.